Okay, so in this part I'm going to show you how to add the FancyBox. The FancyBox is the interactive photo slideshow into your HTML. So I'm going to show you how to do it in this video, but I have some instructions here in the blog. It's called Integrating FancyBox into HTML5. Okay, and it has the steps that you need to take. So before I start, first of all, let me show you what FancyBox is. I have a link here to the FancyBox page. So what the FancyBox does is it allows you to put thumbnails onto an HTML page, and then you can click on them and they pop up in what is called a modal. This is called a modal when the image gets bigger and it floats on top of the HTML page. And you can use the arrow keys to navigate between the images. And these images also have a caption that you can add. Okay, so before I install it, I want to make sure that I have my content. And so my content is going to be my large images, which are the ones I want to appear in the modal. They can be any shape or any size. And then I'm also going to have some thumbnails, some smaller pictures that appear on the HTML page that are embedded within the page that when you click on, you see the bigger image. The thumbnail should be all the same size and shape. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to show you here, that's not it. Here's some of the large images that I have. Okay. So you can see they're all different shapes and sizes, right? And they're big images, no problem. The thumbnails, and I named all my thumbnails a file name beginning with T. So that T bubbling, for example, goes with bubbling, and T chicken cook goes with chicken cook, so that it's much easier for me to link one with the other when I'm ready to put them into the HTML. So here's all the thumbnails. All of my thumbnails are square. Oh, I think that's not one, but this is. I think some of them begin with the letter T. All of the ones that look like this are the thumbnails. So they're all the same size and they're all the same shape. This is very important for being able to put them on the page correctly. And this one, for example, this is a thumbnail. This image is the thumbnail. I'll show you what the big image is. I think it is this one. Okay, it's this one. So this is kind of a detail of this larger image, which is a really good strategy to have for a thumbnail, because if I tried to turn this into a square, it wouldn't be super useful because this is a rectangular image, and I don't want to squish things. I don't want to mess with the aspect ratio. So what I did when I went in Photoshop is I just used a square ratio to crop this into a square. And then I chose a detail, and the detail I chose was the onions here. Okay. Let's see if I can see another example of that. No, not. Okay, here's this. This is the square thumbnail, and I'm going to show you. This is called onion chop. O-chop. Here we go. Again, this is a rectangular image. So when you make your thumbnails, you want them to be square. You want them to be all the same size. The big images, they can be any size that you want them to be. Okay, let me go to my HTML. And last, when we looked at our HTML, I can still hear it sizzling in the background. Where is it? Here it is. And we have our video in here. We have our video loop. We have our vertical video. We have our horizontal video from YouTube. We're going to add a FancyBox. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to go to FancyBox, the FancyBox website, and this is on the blog, but it's at fancyapps.com/fancybox/3. said, this is FancyBox version 3, which is the most recent version of FancyBox. And there's lots of information here, examples, demos, help. But what we're going to do, we're going to take a shortcut. We're going to hit the download button. And what this is going to do, it's like CodePen. It's going to download the FancyBox files onto our computer. Okay, so I'm going to show in Finder. Okay, so here's the zip. Okay, where's our FancyBox folder? It should be on the desktop. Here it is, FancyBox. Here's the FancyBox. It's called FancyBox Master. And if we click it open, oh look, we have our friends dist and source. And so we know from CodePen that what we want is in dist. And there's two files in here. One is jQuery.fancybox.css and the other is jQuery.fancybox.js. The other two are duplicates of these files, but they're in the min format, the minimized format, which means they're the same data, but they're smaller in file size because there are no spaces. And as you can see, so jQuery.fancybox.min.css, it's 13 kilobytes, whereas jQuery.fancybox.css is 17 kilobytes. Okay, so we want these two. And we're just going to copy these two. We're going to drag them into our folder. So I'm going to take jQuery.fancybox.css and jQuery.fancybox.javascript, and I'm going to put them into Tika elements. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my HTML, and I'm going to add the FancyBox CSS. Okay, now when I do link href equals, I now have an option to add jQuery.fancybox.css. rel equals style sheet, type equal text CSS. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a link to the JavaScript. However, there's a catch here. The FancyBox is written in jQuery. jQuery is a variation on the JavaScript library. There are a few of them out there. There's, I think, something called Babel. There's definitely something called Angular. But this is jQuery, so it's not true JavaScript. So to make this script work, I must first link to the jQuery library at Google or at some other location. But Google is one of the more popular ones. So it's like using a font, right? So if we want to use a fancy font from Google Fonts, we have to link to the Google Font library before we can use it in our CSS. This works in a similar way. If we want to use jQuery, which is kind of a fancy version of JavaScript, we must link to the jQuery library at Google before we can use the jQuery script. So this is what I'm going to do, and I have this on the blog, by the way. They also have a link here, but I'm going to go Google jQuery library, posted libraries. Libraries, okay, we're looking for, so D3 is a library, it's a fun one. jQuery, okay. This is the most recent one. We're going to grab this. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to take it back to Dreamweaver. I'm going to paste it. Okay, so that's going to link my HTML directly to the jQuery library at Google. Now I can link that FancyBox jQuery script and then use FancyBox in my project. So script src equals quote jQuery fancybox.js. Oh, sorry. Type equals. So this is still JavaScript, even though it is a variation of JavaScript. Okay. All right, so now we have the link to the library and we have the link to the script. And now, look what happens. Whereas before we just had our HTML, our CSS, now we have a link to the jQuery CSS. Okay, you should never really have to play with this. I've never really found a reason to play with a jQuery FancyBox CSS, but it's here if you want to take a look at it. Okay, this is jQuery min, so this is what's linked at the Google library. Notice that there are no spaces. That's because it's minified, which means there's no spaces, but that's okay. It's a remote file, it's the library, we're never going to edit it. And then this is the jQuery JavaScript, and there's a couple things that we can change here if we want to. Okay, but we'll come back to that. All right, so now we've set that up. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to find a place in our project where we want to put our gallery of thumbnails that we can click on to make an interactive photo slideshow. So I would put it a couple, at least 2 or 3 paragraphs up from the bottom. I'm just going to go ahead and say gallery, or sorry, div ID equal gallery. We're going to put our pictures in here. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to FancyBox for a sec. I have this information on the website, but I'm going to show you where it is here. So what you want to do, this is basically the format. For each image, you put a data FancyBox equal gallery, and then href, and this is the link to the big image. And then here, you have the small image. So you embed the image of the small image in the page, and then you link it to the big image, and that's basically how it works. Where it says data FancyBox gallery, that's what's creating the link to the JavaScript. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it here. Hello, brown cat. Yes, we hear you. Okay, so this, oh, kitty cat. I'm sorry. So this, we're going to link it to a big image. Yes, so we'll do bubbling. And you can rearrange this. And then here, where it says small1.jpg, we're going to link it to T-bubbling, because I have, named this strategically. There we go. Let's put in another one. Let's put in the next one. And I'm doing this alphabetically, but I will probably go back and change this so it is thematic. Chicken cook. Okay, and then the small one. I'm going to show you what this looks like in just a sec. I'm going to put 4 of them in here, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So it's going to be T chicken cook. There we go. Okay, paste it again. Oops, sorry. Then we're going to put another image in here. This is the big image. This is, I think I used Final 2. And then we're going to replace this. So it's T Final 2. There we go. And then one more. And then we'll see what this looks like. And we'll put a 4th image in here. Frozen. Oh, I don't like the frozen. We'll do the garlic. And then we'll replace this with tea garlic. Remember, T stands for thumbnail. Oh, I don't have tea garlic. Okay, maybe tea onion. change this to onion instead of garlic. I didn't make thumbnails for some of them because I didn't use thumbnails for all of them. You'll see how that works in a sec. Sorry, that got away from me. So I'm looking for onion. Here it is. Okay. All right, let's see what that looks like. Okay, video. Oh, look how big those images are. Okay, but if I click on one, oh my goodness, it's the FancyBox, woohoo! Okay, so it's working. So now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to style up the gallery so that these thumbnails, they're much smaller and they fit on the left-hand side of the page, and that the text comes up and wraps around them. Okay, so now that we have our FancyBox working, we have our thumbnails, we click on them, we get a big image, we can use the arrow keys to go from image to image. Very exciting. Now that we have those, let's style up the gallery. We're going to make the thumbnails smaller. We're going to put them, we're going to put 4 of them together on 2 rows, 2 images on 2 rows. So to do that, we need to go to the CSS. So here, I'm going to add a style for the ID called gallery. I'm going to say, okay, let's make this width about, let's try 40% to begin with. And we're going to say background, color. Oh, let's see, what can we do? We could do, oops, I don't have the coloradobe.com open anymore. Let's use that orange. But actually I'm going to use a RGBA version of this. I'll take this first, but then I'm going to make it semi-transparent. So I'll grab this. Okay. Let's say padding. You'll see how that works in a sec. 1%. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. Okay. So now we can see our gallery. We can see that it's about 40% because here's where the orange ends. Our images are still too big. So we need to assign a size to these images inside of the CSS. So the way we do that, let me show you. We're going to style gallery IMG. That's any IMG inside of the gallery ID. We're going to assign them a percentage, like 48%. That's going to make them 48% of the gallery ID, of the gallery div. Let's go back here. I'm going to say gallery IMG. I'm going to say width 48%. See what that looks like. Oh, look at that. Very nice. Actually, I could probably make it 49% if I really wanted to. See if that works. Now, the reason why I'm not using 50, right, okay, that works. The reason why I'm not using 50% of each of these is because we have 1% of padding on each side. So it's like 1 plus 49 plus 49 plus 1. And for some reason this little spacing between doesn't count. Okay, so we have that doing basically what we want it to do. Let's add a title. We're going to add a P inside the gallery div that says gallery. You have to do that in the HTML. All right, here we are inside of gallery. I'm going to add a P. Oops, sorry. And just say gallery. Okay, if I look at that, it's not going to look very exciting. So I'm going to make it center, I'm going to make it bold, I'm going to make it a different font. So I'm going to go to the CSS, and I'm going to call this Gallery P, because it's the only P inside of the gallery. When we styled the images, these are the thumbnails, we said Gallery IMG, because these are the only IMGs. These are the IMGs inside of the gallery, so they all got the same style. So to do this, I'm going to do Gallery P. So I'm going to say Gallery P, and I'm going to say font family. And use the impact. Font size, let's try 2M. And let's do text align center. If you're only dealing with text, you can usually do text align center and it will center the content. Let's look. Oh, very nice. That may be a little bit too big. I might do 1.5 M's instead. Yes, I like that better. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this text so that it wraps up around next to the gallery box. So I'm going to float the gallery ID. I could float it to the left or the right. Maybe I'll float it to the right since I have the video over here on the left. So I'm going to float it over on the right. Okay, so gallery. I'm going to say float. Right. See what that looks like. Oh, there it is. Very nice. And if I wanted to be fancy, I could try to push this off into the margin here. So this is margin right over here. If I set this to like a negative number, like negative 10%, then I can get this to hang off the edge of the article a little bit. I'm going to try that and see what it looks like. So I'm going to say margin right, negative 10%. Oh, look at that. Okay, the other thing I might do if I'm really picky, I don't like the fact that this text is butt up against the edge of my gallery. So if I want to, I can add some margin left to the gallery. I can do 1%. It's going to push this text a little bit over to the left. So I'm going to do that. Okay. Oh, I like it a lot. All right. So now I have my gallery here. So I'm going to show you a little trick. So I have 4 images here, but I have many more big images in my gallery than 4. I have about 8. I don't really want 8 thumbnails here. I only want the 4 thumbnails. And here's the thing. I can have 8 images in my gallery and only have 4 thumbnails. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add those FancyBox lines to the gallery, but I'm going to take out the thumbnail. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go to the HTML. Here's the FancyBox. So right now, each FancyBox has the big image here, and it has the thumbnail here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this. Okay, now I'm going to get the next big image. So whatever's after onion. Oh, we'll put garlic in there. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of the thumbnail. This is the image that's embedded directly in the HTML. The rest is just a link. See that? So all I do is I have a link to the garlic image, but I don't have any thumbnail. Let me try that again. Okay, I'm going to get the image after, if it's after garlic or onion. Let me see. Okay, garlic. Oh, chop. I didn't get that. Did I not get that? No, I didn't get that. I like that image too. So I'm going to put the chop image in there, and then I'm going to get rid of the thumbnail. Okay, I'm going to do that a couple more times. So here, I'm going to replace this. I think do we have onion already? Yes, we do. We don't want poster, raw chicken. Okay. I'm going to take this out. Okay, and then let's do one more. I have more. I think I have 10 images. I could do all 10 of them. I may just stop here at 8. Recipe. Okay, we're going to come back to that one. Spices. I like that one. Okay, and I'd probably reorder this for editorial purposes so that my images would tell more of a story. So here, in my FancyBox, I have 4 images, big images that have thumbnails, and then I have 4 additional big images with no thumbnails. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, I hear it bubbling. Okay, there it is, there it is. Okay, we still have our 4 thumbnails. I'm going to click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I now have 8 big images that I can access from any one of these thumbnails. So if I click here, I start here. But I'm using the arrow keys to go back and forth. You can click on these little tabs here. Okay, so I can add as many big images as I want. I can add as many thumbnails as I want, but I usually like to limit the number of thumbnails. And I would probably reorganize this a little bit to better tell a story. From like the spices might start off, and then the raw chicken and the onion, and I'd reorganize it. Okay, let me show you just a couple other things that you can do with FancyBox. So right now, I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to click through this. When I get to the last image, it stops. I keep clicking the right arrow key, it doesn't go forward. I click this, this is grayed out, I can't go anywhere. I can go back. Okay, so one of the things I can do in the JavaScript is I can tell this to be an infinite loop, so that when I get to the end of the gallery images, I can have it go on forever. Okay, let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to venture into jQuery FancyBox.js. And I've done this before. Okay, defaults. This one says enable infinite gallery navigation, loop false. This is line 43. I'm going to change this to true. Okay, now let's see what happens. Okay, here's my gallery. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, we're back at 1. So now we have the infinite loop, which is very nice. Okay, there's a couple other things I can do here. One is there's a place here. Should display navigation arrows at the screen edges. So here, this turns the arrows on and off. Should display counter at the top left corner. So the counter tells you how many images you have. Here we go. Let's see. One of these describes the animation. Open, close, animation type. So animation effect zoom. So this is when the animation itself opens or closes. So there's not too many options here. There's zoom, fade, and zoom in out. It's set to zoom. Okay, transition effect between slides. This is what happens when you go from slide to slide. So they've set it up to be fade, but they're showing us here that there are some options. We can slide, we can circular, we can tube, we can zoom in and out, we can rotate. So it's by default, it's on fade. I'm going to change this to rotate. Let's see what happens. Whoa! Whoa! Okay, now you may not want this for aesthetic reasons, but this just goes to show some of the things that you can change if you want to. I'm going to set that back to zoom, or to fade. Is it zoom or fade? Set it to slide. That might be a nice one. Okay. Oh, duration in milliseconds for transition animation. So we can change this. Right now it's 366 milliseconds. That's a third of a second. We could set it to 1 second. Oh, sorry, 1,000 milliseconds. That'll be 1 second. Let's look at it. Oh. There we go. 1. Now it's sliding every 1 second. It's a little slow. We might want to change that to 500, which is half a millisecond. Okay. Okay, so we have our FancyBox working. I'm going to show you just one last thing that you can do in FancyBox. There's actually a whole bunch of things you can do in FancyBox. You can actually put video in here instead of still images. If you want to do that, you should look at the FancyBox documentation. It's on the FancyBox site. But I'm going to show you how to put a caption so that when we click on these images, we get a caption down here like bubbling on the stove. I put that one in already. Okay, so let me show you how I did that. And then we're going to change the style of that caption. Okay, now I have done this a few times, so I know the way to add a caption is inside of the A tag of each of your FancyBox things. You put a line that says data-caption, so it should appear in green. Data-caption, just like data-FancyBox. Data-caption equal quote, and then in quotes you put the text of your caption, like right here. Okay, let's try it for the next one. This is the one where the chicken is cooking on the stove. So I'm going to put this in here. You put it inside of the A. You put it before the link to the large image. So I'm going to say data-caption equal quote chicken cooking on stove. Okay. So data-caption is green. My text is in quotes and it's yellow. So this is final. This is what it looks like when it's all done and sitting in the dish. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to add data-caption equals quote the final product. Okay, same thing, data-caption. I'm going to come down here. This is the picture of the onion. I'm going to say, data-caption equals quote onion about to be chopped. Okay, I think that's what that one is. This one is the garlic. So here I'm going to say data-caption equal garlic. I'm just going to say garlic on that one. I think this is the chopped onion picture. Oh, this is okay. I have these reversed. This is the one where the onion is already chopped, and this is the one, okay. So let me just copy this. I'm going to put this one here. O chop is where it's already chopped. So this is, or the onion is where it's already chopped. Onion, garlic, and ginger chopped. Doesn't really matter how long you make these captions. You don't want them to be super long though. Okay, this is raw chicken. Yeah, okay. So here again, I'm going to say data dash caption equal quote chicken about to be cooked. And here, this is a picture of the spices. Data dash caption, oops, got to spell caption correctly, equals quote spices for the recipe. Okay, so now I have captions. I don't know why it keeps highlighting that stuff. I have captions on each of my, I have captions on each of my things. So let's see what happens when I preview. Okay, here we go. Here's my FancyBox. Bubbling on the stove. Chicken cooking on the stove. The final product. Onion, garlic, and ginger chopped. Garlic. Onion about to be chopped. Chicken about to be cooked. Spices for the recipe. Okay, so I have all of my captions. But let's say what I really want to do is I want to style this. I don't like serif fonts. I've never liked serif fonts. So I'm going to style this. I'm going to use probably Impact. So what I'm going to do is, I think the style is .fancybox-caption. I know that because I've done this before and I've looked on the web. Also, if I'm brave and I look there it is. I look into the FancyBox CSS. I can see that. So what I'm going to do in my CSS, I'm not going to touch the FancyBox CSS. I'm going to add a style called FancyBox dash caption. And then I'm going to say font family. I'm going to set that to Impact. Let's say font size, let's make it 1.2M. And we'll say color, let's set it to yellow, just so we can see it. Alright, let's see if those styles take. Alright, so I'm going to reload this. Oh, okay. So the font family worked and the size worked. For some reason the color did not work. I wonder why. Color. Let's use, I don't know. Let's use red. It could be that somewhere in the FancyBox CSS it's overriding this so that it's white. Okay. There's probably another way to change it, but as you can see, I can change the font family and I can change the size. I'm sure if I do a little more research, I can change the color as well. Okay, but there you go. So that's the basics of the FancyBox. If you want to customize your FancyBox, you can use the documentation on the FancyBox site. In my last video, I'm going to go over how to make your site responsive, how to use the media queries. So if you get a screen smaller than, say, 750 pixels, you go back to the tubular format so everything goes into one tube.